So first up, let's have a look at those rather exciting looking new spy shots from Triumph that appear to show a couple of bikes that look like they're very close to being production ready. Both seem to be based upon their 400 lineup, which was introduced a couple of years back, primarily I guess to sell more in Asian markets where generally smaller capacity bikes are more popular, but also as a side benefit, it brought the Triumph brand to a more affordable price point elsewhere. And it really seems to have worked. We recently looked at some of the industry sales figures in the UK for 2024. And the Spied 400 and Scrambler 400X were both up there amongst the best sellers. You see, despite being built on their behalf in India by Bajaj in order to make them available at that really aggressive price point, they've still managed to retain the level of fit and finish and design that you'd expect from a Triumph. The handling is great too, despite relatively budget components, and the single-cylinder TR Series 400 engine has plenty of depth and torque and character at the exhaust, which makes it a natural smaller sibling for the Bonneville platform. As it stands in the lineup, the Spied 400 is the sort of sporty retro naked, whereas the Scrambler 400X is a little taller in its stance. It's got a larger front wheel as well, and therefore offers something a little more versatile perhaps and more rugged. But it seems like from these pictures, Triumph have been spurred on by the initial success of those first two models, with a couple more variants that ought to follow on pretty soon. Now the first, I'd say, we've already known about this one for a little while, having seen spy shots already a couple of months back, but these new pictures are the best I've seen yet and do show the spec in really good detail. It's a sort of half-fared, more sporty version of the Spied 400, which I guess could either be called the Thruxton 400 or, as others have suggested, perhaps the Spied 400 RR, mainly because of its resemblance to the Spied Triple 1200 RR in both the headlight and the fairing. Largely though, the rest of the bike looks to be pretty much the same as the Spied 400, although I'd say that's by no means a bad thing, as it's a nice handling bike with plenty of shove from the engines. So the 40 horsepower single, the upside down fork, the monoshock at the rear, the radial bi-brake front brake and the 17-inch wheels front and rear all look to be directly carried over, but that half fairing does give it a bit more of a sporty look, and the riding position has been tweaked to match with what look like lower and narrower clip-on style handlebars, although I will say they're not super low and aggressive, which hopefully means they'll maintain some of its appeal. In fact, that makes me kind of think I'm a little bit unsure about this one. I do think it'll look nice and also it should be fun to ride, but from a commercial perspective, I'm a bit less convinced, especially when you consider that recently they've discontinued the Thruxton 1200 a year or two back, the Spied Triple 1200 RR in the last month or so, and both of those bikes had relatively aggressive riding positions with clip-on style bars. That, I think, generally was the problem when it comes to sales, with most potential buyers probably preferring the comfort and versatility of the more upright naked equivalents. And you could even argue the same pattern with the discontinued Daytona versus the Street Triple 765. And I'd be very surprised also if the current Daytona 660 sells in anywhere near the same volumes as the Trident 660 naked. So what is it, I wonder, that makes Triumph think that this smaller capacity segment is any different? Perhaps the bigger sales volumes that they can achieve with these smaller, more affordable bikes makes it still worthwhile to make a sporty variant, even if it is a bit more niche, let's say, than the Spied 400. Or could it just be another, short product life cycle where they stick it out there on the market for a couple of years, see how it does, but ultimately don't sell enough to make it viable? I'd love to know what you think down in the comments. The second bike though, well, this one really does look rather good to me, and it appears to be a more aggressive version of the Scrambler 400X. If we were following the naming conventions of the 1200 models, then you could assume it will be called the Scrambler 400XE. And again, while the engine, the frame, the tank and a lot of the styling are carried over, well, it looks like it sits a little bit taller for more ground clearance and therefore a bit more off-road ability. On top of that, it's got a sump guard under the belly too for a bit more protection, a high-mounted front mudguard, and also spoke wheels, which should be a touch more durable, let's say, than the cast wheels of the standard version. Speaking of which, that existing Scrambler 400X is a really nice bike indeed, especially for the money, but I think with the sort of moderate stance, despite the robust looks, it is largely built for the road and perhaps a little bit of light off-road gravel work. This one, though, could be a bit more serious and offer a much more affordable and lightweight alternative for anyone who likes the idea of a Scrambler 1200 XE. The only downside, I suppose, is that the bar position looks similar to the X, and I don't remember it being particularly favourable when it comes to standing up. And also, the wheels are still a 19-inch front and a 17 at the rear, so not super aggressive in its off-road bias. Then again, this was realistically never going to be a competitor for something like a KTM Adventure R. It was never going to be, a really hardcore off-road trail bike, but more so a balance between, a bit of off-road ability while still maintaining Triumph's typically beautifully done and very cool retro looks. So what do you think? Style over substance or a winning combo? Let me know down in the comments below, and whether you think these two bikes are an improvement over the existing models or whether you'd still just take a Spied 400 or a Scrambler 400X. Unfortunately, no firm dates on these ones as of yet, but like I say, they do look pretty close to being finished, so I'd expect probably in the next year or so. And so if you're not already, then do hit subscribe and we'll be the first to post about it as soon as we hear any more details.